The thing that blew me away, and this is, I want to say this like multiple times here. What blew me away about coherence is that this doesn't take years to master. In fact, I would actually challenge you. You guys have something called the Paragon Pause.
I heard someone say that the heart rhythm pattern that will go to your brain is the same whether you're under stress from that text message or email that you get from the client and being in a car accident.
And I think the thing that you and Jeff taught me was that in literally 60 seconds or less, you can change everything.
I can, one, pause, recognize the internal weather is changing. So I'm going from calm to stormy, recognize it, to then be able to connect to your breath while you're intentionally focusing awareness in the center of your chest. And even for 10, 20, 30 seconds, just take a few easy breaths through your heart. Allow the rhythms of your heart to start to smooth out so that the nervous system says, okay, hold on a second, we're not in danger. I know this ding dong in front of us can't work their iPhone properly, and you got a meeting to get to, but it's not life and death. We're going to be okay. The chaos isn't going away. Um, you just become this. You become the storm, right? It's like the famous saying, "Fate whispers to the warrior, you can't handle the storm," and the warrior whispers back, "I am the storm."
What is heart coherence? Because why is heart coherence even having conversations in Fortune 500 company boardroom? When people do heart coherence, what's on the other side of it?
Well, I think what you mentioned are some of the byproducts when we achieve heart coherence. But simply put, achieving a physiological state where your thoughts, your nervous system, your emotions are all running in coordination together, right? Athletes will typically say, I was in the zone. Or the concept, I'm sure your listeners are familiar with the concept of flow, right? Thank you, Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, for bringing that topic to the masses. So for us, when we talk about coherence and we talk about heart and brain, I think the brain is a key piece of this, right? It is, how does the heart communicate with the brain that allows us to then show up and be the best version of ourselves? And to unpack that a little more, we have to understand, well, what role does the heart play in the way that I show up? How does the heart impact the way my brain functions? And these are topics that were not part of the vernacular for me growing up. And I think that's probably true for most people. These aren't topics that are necessarily being studied in school, but, thanks to our partners at the HeartMath Institute for having the vision and the courage 30, 40 years ago to start to really understand what is the relationship between the heart and the brain? How does it impact the way our nervous system operates? And then ultimately, how does it allow us to show up so that we can navigate the craziness of life more grounded, more steady, more thoughtful? How do we access our intuition, our creativity? How do we make better decisions and problem solve when we're under stress, when we're under pressure, when we're feeling urgency? And so for us, it's the foundation of the work that we do. And yes, I'm sure we'll get into, kind of how we bring a lot of what we do to life, but it starts with helping an individual recognize how they process stress, how stress impacts them physiologically and neurologically, and then recognizing the role that the heart plays in terms of brain function, in terms of our energy, in terms of our presence. And again, I was taught the heart is this muscle in the center of the chest and it's pumping blood and keep the valves clear and, all those kind of basic things. But what I've come to learn over the last, many years of personally doing this work and now, teaching it and facilitating it is the heart has a brain of its own. And most of our intelligence, most of our wisdom, most of the guidance starts in the heart. Yes, the brain obviously plays an important role in that in terms of cortical functioning and the central nervous system. But as far as how we're processing the things happening in our external world, we have to understand the role that the heart plays that allow us to get to this state where we can be present, where we can feel grounded. Right? I like to think of it as when you're in the middle of a storm, or if you've ever been in a storm. We were talking about being at the beach earlier. when the waves are whipping and the wind is, swirling, and what allows you to hold steady in the middle of that? How can you actually be like a lighthouse, right? The lighthouse is, I think a good acronym, or comparison to how we want to show up when there's complexity in the world. And it starts with the rhythms of the heart. If we're sending a stressed out, chaotic, erratic signal from the heart to the brain, then the parts of the brain that we need to problem solve are going to go offline. We're going to be living in that fight or flight state, which is, it's gotten us through many centuries of evolution. But in today's complex world, when we're living out of the low part of the brain, the amygdala, we are compromised in terms of the way that our frontal cortex works, which is what allows us to make good decisions, to problem solve, to communicate effectively, to be empathetic, to have compassion, right? Because we're in survival mode when we're under stress. If we can shift the rhythms of the heart to a more coherent, wavy, flexible pattern, the signal the brain receives will allow us to recognize we're not in danger. That primitive response that we have of survival, we can now have more perspective. We can have more flexibility. We can have more a sense of stillness. We can slow the game down.
I think a lot of people when you talk about, man, hit the flow, in the flow. They think about maybe, flow from a standpoint like you did yoga or you did some meditation. And I think the thing that's really important to understand that when you're talking about flow, you're talking about you do not need to be born with a genetic like disposition like LeBron James that's 6'8" and who can like run like a 4.4. Like this is not like you do not need that disposition to be able to do it. And I'm curious when you bring this to a boardroom, right? I mean, you've had like some conversations with MGM and I know you've done work with like Google's like Women Core, right? And amongst other things in Delta Force. And I'm trying to give like the audience a kind of a broad spectrum here, right? You got like a technology company, you got a media company, and then you have like the elite of the elite of like specimens. And one core thing that is true amongst all of them is that they are doing this heart coherence. So, can you talk about why? Like how is it received when you start talking about it? And when they start doing it, what are their results?
It's a great question. How is it received? I think can be mixed because it depends. It depends, the makeup of that person and what they're bringing to maybe the first interaction they have with us. And for a lot of them, it's probably like the first time I heard about this stuff, which is like, seems like a bunch of bullshit. Like, honestly, because I was not brought up in an environment where we were, talking about mindfulness. We were not being reflective. We were not aware of emotions and the role that emotions played in our daily interactions. Man, like we were just living. And so I think it's wonderful when we get to work with these different organizations, whether it's a Fortune 500 company or a movie studio or a military unit or an Ivy League institution. People are people, right? And we each bring our own story to the experience. And so for us, it's really about helping each of the individuals in that room when they first experience what it is we're sharing to recognize that this is not for the chosen few. And you kind of alluded to this, right? Like you aren't just born with coherence, right? It is a skill that we can learn, that all of us can learn. As long as your heart is beating and you have the capability to connect with your breath and you can, create that sort of moment of stillness, we can all access it. The challenge is, how do I navigate my wiring? How do I navigate the habits that I've developed? How do I navigate my behaviors and my beliefs and my perceptions so that I can actually get to a place where I can connect to myself? And I think that's maybe the most challenging thing in that process, because a lot of the people that we work with are, as you said, they're elite performers, regardless of the field they're in. And so their mindset is, well, what I've done to date has gotten me to where I am. But when you start to unpack it and you start to recognize, maybe I do have tension in my life. Maybe I wasn't able to label it. So the first step is creating awareness around it. I have to recognize that I don't feel comfortable in certain situations. That, yeah, I may have the external package, right? I might look like success. I might have the title. I might have the salary. I might have the material things that project success. But why internally am I not feeling aligned? Why am I feeling tension or resistance? And again, in a lot of cases, I don't think we have the capability to name that. So we first have to help these elite performers recognize, one, it's okay to, to be stressed. And I think in today's world in 2026, it feels like it's the norm. And I'm sure you sense this in your work with your clients. Like, people are just stressed and they think that this is normal. This is how we're supposed to be. And the reality is that we are much more, what's the best way to say this? We were designed as these creatures, these human beings, to be in a state of homeostasis, to be in flow. But then we let life get in the way. We let our beliefs get in the way. We let our nervous system, the way it processes stress, get in the way. So the first step is, well, let's help you understand and call awareness to your thought patterns. What are the emotions that you experience when you go through stressful things? What are the behavior patterns that you tend to notice in yourself? There's a bit of pulling the onion back, the layers of the onion, and being really honest. And that can be challenging for a lot of high performers because they've done it a certain way and they've persisted and they've used urgency and pressure to get to the top. But I think what they maybe don't understand is the human biological system is designed to burn out if we don't set aside time for rest, repair, and recovery. And there's been tons of studies on this going back 80 years to World War II. So just understanding that there's a universal principle that our biology will break down at a certain point and we have to nurture it, we have to care for it. And so when we get elite performers in the room, whether they're in the military, whether they're professional athletes, whether they're in the C-suite of a corporation or a university, is first understanding that everyone processes stress differently, and it's not about necessarily singling out your vulnerabilities or your shortcomings. It's just about creating awareness around it, and from there, if they're open to it, we can start to help them put the building blocks together to then start to change their internal wiring.
Yeah, what are some before and afters? You walked in, I mean, what are some of your best ones? Like, you walked in and it was like, whoa, this room is full of elite stress. And then you left. And then can you talk a little bit about what's happened where you've seen transformations that have not just been in terms of how people treat each other, but like bottom line, like they're like, wow, okay, like this was, you can clearly see that they are utilizing this to take their performance to another level.
The beauty of the work that Jeff and I get to do is that we see this on such a regular basis, and it's really humbling because I think when you see a group come in and number one, you can feel the stress. You can just feel it energetically. You can see it. It's visible in people. I'm thinking about one organization that we are working with in the higher education space. And this group is dealing in some of the more challenging situations that you'll find on a university campus, right? So they're dealing in, kind of the civil rights space. And they're at a university where there's been a lot of challenging experiences over the last several years. And many of these folks, I think, have just gotten conditioned to, well, this is the way it is. And so the first thing is when we bring them together is recognizing that not everybody is going to lean in and raise their hand and say, I'm ready to get vulnerable. I'm ready to, right? I'm ready to transform. Use the word transformation. And again, some are going to look at you like, dude, like this is not a realistic thing for what we do. And so when we create the opportunity and the conditions for them to, one, just maybe even slightly recognize and have awareness around their own behavior patterns. And then two, we create a space where people feel that it's actually okay to open up. And I think part of it is Jeff and I realize we have to model this behavior. We can't just go in and be presenters or facilitators. That our modeling of this and our stories are really relevant to the change that we want to help create for our clients. And I feel like there's a lot of consistency when we get the chance to spend a day with a team. We saw this with your team, Ben, to be honest. And even though we didn't spend a lot of time getting into communication and some of the techniques and the tools around communication, when we get to the point in a half day or a full day with the team, and we've helped them understand the concept of heart brain coherence, we teach them a few techniques. And again, some of them are still sitting there, arms crossed and eyes rolling, and this isn't my jam. When we start to get into communication and we create a space where they can start to engage in pairs or in small groups with one another, and we lightly facilitate a process where someone can truly be heard, something really happens. And in this particular group, this university team that I'm thinking of, by the afternoon when we got into more reflective questions about how they operate their business, what I witnessed was something truly powerful, because a lot of them came into the room feeling annoyed, irritated. You're taking me away from my day to day work. I've got a long to do list. I had to drive to get here, right? All the things that they tend to arrive maybe in the course of a day with. And for a lot of elite performers, the idea of actually taking space to step away and reflect and connect is very foreign. This doesn't happen in a lot of organizations, which is why, we love leaders like you that recognize how important this is for your teams. By the afternoon, this group is starting to lean in and support one another and get curious and ask questions. And all I could do is sit back and feel like a proud parent watching them interact with one another. And the leader of the team, who I think had some concerns about bringing his group together to do this work, even though he's done it himself and recognized it's important. He had this huge smile on his face because he saw the shift that happened over the course of only a few hours. And while we didn't fix or solve anything that day, we started to lay down the possibility of, well, if we can operate this way as a norm, maybe we actually can then work through all the external challenges that we're navigating, that maybe we would point the finger at and say, we can't do our jobs properly because of them, because of that process, that procedure. And instead, they got to decide and own and take accountability for, wait a minute, it's our choice as far as the culture that we want to have within our team. Even if our management, even if leadership at the university doesn't agree or doesn't support it, we get to determine and have the choice of how we want to show up every day and support each other. And that, to me, is one of the most powerful things. So when you talk about outcomes, seeing that happen in real time, it's become commonplace with our clients. We see people who are in silos for decades because this is the way we always did things, right? I'm holding up the air quotes in case
Yeah.
we're just on audio for anyone listening. And then as they go through this process, now they start to lean in and recognize, actually, that colleague of mine that I felt threatened by, I can feel safe with and I can offer support with. And they're asking me what I need for support. And it's just basic human behavior. It sounds overly simplistic, but when you think about the complexities of the world, we need to slow the record down. We need to slow the dance down and start to tap in, I think, to some of these human, kind of basic interactions.
And I was saying that I think so often people have it down into like this dual like narrative. It's either in terms of it's happening to you or for you. And I think the thing that I realize even now, even as we're talking, is that I said that last stuff I'm working with my clients is that it's not to or for you, it's actually through you. And I think that so often, like what you are doing with the heart coherence is like putting the paintbrush back in the artist's hand, right? And that everyone is like they are the Picasso, they are the Van Gogh, right? That you are the creator. And I'd love if you could you talk a little bit about that, like being the creator.
And this, I'll give Jeff a lot of credit here because he's really inspired me to adopt this perspective on life, and it's been a big inspiration for the not only the work that we're doing, but our business partnership and our friendship, our brotherhood. We've known each other 30 years. And I love how you said that it's not whether the world is being done to you or happening for you as much as it is flowing through you. So, this idea of being the creator of the things that you want to experience in your world, first of all, it takes the awareness we talked about earlier, recognizing what is happening in your experience, but this idea that we can be in control of the experience that we go through, or maybe not what's taking place, the stressor that's being presented to us, right? Because things happen, right? We get into accidents, people act poorly, we can be on the wrong end of unfortunate things, no doubt. But how do we actually experience those moments, and can we control the way we respond to it? And then can we start to create a mindset and a vision for what it is that we want to build in our lives? We can design a plan and have a vision. And then when we look back, it's like, oh, well, actually, it didn't turn out the way I drew it up on the whiteboard, but my gosh, it was incredible. What is transpiring is something way beyond what I could have even imagined. And I think when we allow ourselves to, one, process and manage the way our body responds to stress, to get into a state of coherence, and we start to open ourselves up to possibility. But ultimately, it really starts with prioritizing our state of being and being in a more coherent state as your norm rather than as the exception.
But I also think that what I'm realizing as I'm listening to you, it's also not only about the beginning in how you are being present in the middle and the end, but it's like in that middle end is the word that keeps coming to me is metabolize. Heart coherence allows you to actually metabolize. And the thing that just popped into my head was when you talked about presence, I find that often the things that people would want to like avoid are the times that actually are sort of like the you practice and then it's like then you need to be like present. And the example that for me that pops in and I'm thinking about was the 16 days between my son's birth and then when he died. It was the most present it's the most present 16 days I've ever had in my life. And I think about by being so incredibly present, it, and especially together with Jenna, is that when he died, it has truly only been the most beautiful, deeply felt, but my life has only become more beautiful as a result of it. And I'm just like listening to you and going, but a huge portion of it was because I refused to turn away from any and all of the feelings. I refused to pretend anything wasn't actually like happening. And I think that that really allowed me to look at it and say, is there another way I could be looking at this? And I think that is, but I think it's because the metabolizing and I think that when I look at other people who've gone through what Jenna and I went through, there's a lot of people who did not metabolize it and they are wrecked and or their marriage is in shambles or completely over. And so I thought that was interesting how you metabolize it. But one of the things you said though was that it's about this energy management. And I think so often when you're dealing with elite people, I think about, one of the things you talked about I can't remember if it was in this conversation or something I had read, or it was in a conversation we had in Austin, but about Cornell. One of the people there had said one of the things that drew them to you was this idea around an intelligent energy management, which I thought was really interesting because people just go energy management, right? It's just like food in, energy out, right? Like it's just that simple, kind of that Neanderthalic. But I think that that was really interesting. And I'm curious, how does that combat time management, right? Because I think that people go, well, aren't those the same thing?
Well, I would say time management is a byproduct of having intelligent energy management. So and some of your listeners may be saying, well, what the heck is intelligent energy management? And then two, the emotional experience that we have from those thoughts. By the way, thank you for sharing about your son, because I know that you've shared it on other podcasts that I've listened to. Jeff has mentioned it. it came up in our few days in Austin together, but you and I haven't had a chance to share about that. And so the compassion that I have for you and Jenna going through that sort of traumatic experience, yeah, like I really feel that as a parent in my heart, and the fact that you've been able to face it, to metabolize it, to confront it, to sit with it, to give attention to it. To me, that is a function of managing your energy intelligently, to have the awareness of and the recognition that you can have this incredibly intense suffering and pain and loss and grief, and yet you can use it as a thread and a through line into creating some of the greatest experiences of your life and learnings of your life.
And Brett, just to put on there, you just helped me because I think the thing that what was the intelligent thing that I took from it is I realized that Newton's law equal and opposite reactions is true. So if I'm feeling these deep griefs, that means that there is a concurrent energy running of love, joy, and abundance. And that was the thing that it kept going because I was like, man, I am feeling this so deeply. And I was like, but there is also means that for that to exist, there has to be an equal and opposite side of this.
Isn't that what being human is about, though? Right? Like we label emotions, and so when we talk about intelligent energy management, it is recognizing the emotional experience that we have moment to moment, and not so much to bear their deepest, darkest secrets, right? Because for some folks, talking about stressors can be very challenging to even identify them, right? And again, the brain is a record of the past. So just remembering a stressful experience causes the body to produce cortisol and adrenaline in the moment because the brain doesn't recognize memory versus it's happening now. But most importantly, for them to identify, well, what do I actually feel when I experience this stress, right? And it could be something minor. It could be that, when I get that email from my boss at 11:30 p.m. because they tend to work through the night, right? And the expectation that I've got to answer by 7 a.m. the next day. But then to not only identify the emotion, to identify the behavior that comes with it. The signals. What are the signals when I'm under pressure, when I'm in a feeling urgency, right? And I love the Eisenhower quote. He talked about in his presidency, there were a lot of things that were important and a lot of things that were urgent, but rarely was the important stuff urgent, and rarely was the urgent stuff, the other way around. And I think to be able to manage your energy properly, to be able to slow your nervous system down, to get into the present moment, to access the key areas of your brain that you need to navigate the complexity, the challenge that's being presented to you, part of it is actually being able to feel into those emotions. I felt like, well, now that I've developed the tools and the skills and I can get to coherence, I don't have to pay much attention to the anger, the frustration, the sadness, whatever it is that was coming up. And as I've learned over time, it's actually sitting with those depleting emotions and not labeling them good or bad, because I think we're in a society of judgment. And to be raised thinking, well, sadness is bad, guilt is bad, grief is bad, and joy is good, and gratitude is good, and to not label them, but just to observe them as just a human experience. And I've shared with you that we've been navigating as parents in our family a really challenging last 6 years with our son, who's now 24, and his mental health since the start of COVID. And there have been a lot of really difficult experiences along the way that have helped me grow, have helped me learn, have helped me confront these emotions that tend to deplete us, to deplete our energy. And what I've come to recognize is that if I can sit with the grief and the sadness, much like I'm sure you and Jenna have experienced with the loss of your son, I know it's going to open me up to be a much better husband, father to our daughter and to our son, to a better son, to my parents, a better sibling to my sister, a better business partner, a better colleague, a better friend. Because as I get more comfortable with understanding and what's underneath the sadness, the frustration, the anger, whatever it might be, it just allows me to be a much more real version of myself, a more aligned version of myself. I was taught to kind of push through. If bad things happen, you just keep pushing along, you persist, you push the pedal down further, you work harder, you keep a smile on your face, and you don't really acknowledge, because gosh, vulnerability is weakness, right?
Yeah.
Well, you and I have learned, and others have learned, that it's actually the opposite.
To just get down to the point that I think is, to your point, I think that that these things that are happening that feel like they're happening to us, like anger, shame, guilt, these are actually incredible gifts. These are incredible gifts given to us, that these are down payments. And that was the thing that I started to look at, was in thinking about differently when I have like these emotions where I'm going, I'm really excited to like dive into this, because think about, we as Americans specifically, we love buying shit. So I was like, why don't I just gamify it? Because every growth factor I've ever had has been preceded by something really hard, something potentially others might deem as unpleasant, or it didn't feel good. And I started to, or unfortunate. And I started thinking about these things as just, what happens if we thought about them as down payments? And the reality is, I have no idea what I just purchased, right? Like, so when I'm feeling angry, or if Jen and I are having like what I like to call marital conversation, like what helps me in terms of, it's not that like, hey, I don't not want to be angry, because I would love to move to a place of coherence where I'm like, and you know what? And now we're able to have this as a collaboration versus a contention. But I'm always just distinctly aware that on the other side of this is, we locked in something. I don't know. Like, how does that land for you when I say that?
Well, I love the term. What do you call it? A marital conversation. Anyone who's married or in a relationship can relate to this, right?
Yes.
Um, so I would ask you, when you have one of those circumstances, and it could be something that's very heavy,
Yeah.
right? And I'm sure the loss of your son, was followed by a lot of these very sort of heavy conversations, but it also could be something trivial that just kind of happens over the course of the day. And we have stress that builds up from other things in our life. And then all of a sudden we're at home at the end of the day, and we're thinking about the meeting, we're thinking about the client that fired us, or we're thinking about the colleague that, didn't follow process that we'd spent months putting into place, whatever it might be. And then our spouse, partner, whoever's cohabitating with us, bears the brunt of that outburst, right? that that
Yeah.
that stress leak. And I would just ask, when you're in that moment, what do you recognize as a signal for you? Like, where in your body do you notice that this is not feeling aligned for me?
I think that my first gut reaction says, I feel it in my chest. I feel it in my chest. And I think the thing that I'm realizing, and I've been contemplating like on this, is that I sometimes wonder if the space that I hold for myself in like dealing with like maybe those things, whether it's the client, the frustration, the vision not coming to fruition, is the same space that I hold for others. And that's actually one of the things that I think I've come to the realization that I've learned to metabolize things really, really quickly. Yeah, and there's a lot, and there's a yeah, there's a lot of things that I think that like you can totally just swallow whole, be like metabolize it, boom, you can move on. But I'm realizing that there are things that I need to hold more space for. Recently, I had a friend say, like, the greatest, it was a Dan Sullivan quote, I think, "The greatest freedom is allowing others the freedom to experience their experiences." And I realized that sometimes there's things in myself that I'm maybe not giving the holding the space for. And I've become distinctly aware, and this is like a recent, like very like recent, like aha, that I think that when I am feeling that in my chest, is rather than it's a they're not understanding, I'm not being seen, heard, and understood, it's actually an indication of, this should be, I need to hold space. And the question isn't they're not doing, the question should be, what can I be? What do they need?
Yeah, and as elite performers, we are wired to solve problems. to fix, right? And so a lot of these environments that we are fortunate to be invited into, we're working with people that are accustomed to solving the problem, to fixing the issue, to doing rather than just being. What you described is really hard to do when you're in a stress response. Really hard to do, right? Because and it's interesting that you feel it in your chest because it's almost like mini heartbreak. Like you care so deeply about this person that you're with. In this case, we're talking about your spouse, that it hurts you to see them struggling. And yet, the greatest thing you can do in that moment is not to fix their hurt. It's to just allow them to experience it. So we've grown up together. And it took me years to figure that out, that her discomfort was not an indicator for me to try to fix something, that it's really an indicator for me to just sit and listen. And I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress. We do an exercise where we ask clients, what's the title of your autobiography? And one of mine is like still processing, still in progress, right? But I have recognized that, I have a client who said that she likes to use the term, do you want me to hear, help, or hug? And I love that. And I know I can do a better job of it, especially with our daughter, who's a rising senior in college and super well adjusted and a high performer. But I see the struggle. I see the at times inability to manage stress. And it's so apparent. And I just want to jump in and give her all the advice. And I know that that's not always the answer. That, to your point, maybe she just wants to vent because she doesn't feel safe enough to vent with her friends. Or maybe she doesn't have the space to do that. And she has that with us. And so anytime I want to step in and offer a coaching suggestion, and she'll tell me right away, she's like, I don't need a coaching session, which is incredibly humbling, right? But I think these are the everyday life experiences, right? So coherence isn't something that we're looking for in just the big moment. Like, yeah, we would love to be in a state of coherence when we have to give the presentation to our board, or when we have to close the deal with our client, or when we have to have a really challenging, hard conversation with someone on our team or a family member that we've been putting off. Coherence is about the small moments every single day where we recognize it, where we're present, where we feel it. We feel the connection to the person that we're interacting with. And by the way, sometimes it's when we're just interacting with ourselves.
One of the things I love that you just articulated, because I think people are like, "Oh, okay, hey, that I can have this coherence, and I'm gonna like crush it." And you actually said, "No, it's not that." Because I was thinking about myself as I was listening to you. I hold space for having difficult conversation. I hold space for like doing big deals. I hold space for creating vision, but it's actually in terms of I think where I don't know who said this. How you do anything is how you do everything is that it's the small ones. And the thing that blew me away, and this is I wanna say this, like, multiple times here. What blew me away about coherence is that this doesn't take years to master. In fact, I would actually challenge you. You guys have something called the Paragon Pause, which I think a lot of people, when I'm gonna say this, they're gonna go, like, "That this is it?" And I think the thing that you and Jeff taught me was that in literally 60 seconds or less, you can change everything. So can you talk a little bit about the Paragon Pause and what it is and why people find it so unbelievable?
Yeah. And credit to a member of our team who really kind of coined that and started to put it out on our socials. But it's really the choice point that what we call a choice point. It's these micro moments when we're presented with a situation in life. It could be something minor. It could be waiting in line at Starbucks for the $9 latte, and the person in front of you is fumbling through their wallet for the credit card, or they can't get the app to, right, and you have a meeting coming up and all you want to do is get your latte order in and get on with your day, and you're feeling the cauldron start to boil. can you just take a few easy breaths while you focus in the center of your chest? So, number one, I'm now taking the attention away from the person in front of me fumbling to get their password into their app. I'm now focusing on my core center, right? The area of my heart where all of my guidance and all of my wisdom lives, and where the signals that are going to my brain need to be more flexible and coherent so that I can think more properly. If I can just take a few easy breaths through that part of my body, just do a little heart focused breathing. That's so when you said 60 seconds, I imagine that's what you were referring to. I can one pause, recognize the internal weather is changing. So I'm going from calm to stormy, recognize it, to then be able to connect to your breath while you're intentionally focusing awareness in the center of your chest. Allow the rhythms of your heart to start to smooth out so that the nervous system says, okay, hold on a second, we're not in danger. I know this ding dong in front of us can't work their iPhone properly, and you got a meeting to get to, but it's not life and death. We're going to be okay. And now, physiologically, by taking that moment, okay, maybe I can go from really angry to just maybe mad. Maybe I can just get to lightly frustrated. Maybe I can even get to neutral. Maybe I can eventually, if I do this enough, get to a place where I'm like, I've got a lot of compassion for this person in front of me because they remind me of a parent who struggles with technology. And I think that's a byproduct of recognizing in the moment how we're experiencing a stressful interaction, and then having the wherewithal to press the pause button and say, hang on a second, I actually have the ability to create my own experience here. So the Paragon Pause allows us to come into the present moment, settle our nervous system, slow the system down, and start to access the key areas of the brain that we need for perspective, compassion, empathy, flexibility. So the idea of focusing the attention in the area of the heart is, the saying, where your attention goes, the energy flows. So if we asked you to focus your attention on your right pinky finger and I had you hooked up to a blood flow monitor, there's a good chance that we would see an increase in blood flow to that part of your body. So by focusing on the center of the chest, the area of the heart, with intention, and then breathing and imagining the sensation of the breath is coming in and out of your chest as if that's the only place that your breath can go, the heart is super smart. It recognizes, oh, this is my cue. This is my cue to go from that erratic signal that I am sending up to the brain because there's a stressor, because my human system is designed for survival, to recognize if I slow down and I breathe through the center of my chest, I can literally start to activate the part of my nervous system that is the braking component. So there are two mechanisms to the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. There's the gas pedal, that's called the sympathetic branch. When we're always on adrenaline, cortisol, we're going, going, going. When we activate the rhythms of the heart and we slow our breathing down, we're just tapping the brakes on our nervous system. Because remember, like, our system was designed for survival. It's the same prehistoric system for the most part, right? We've evolved a bit over time, but the fight or flight mechanism is pretty much the same. And the brain doesn't recognize the difference between, physical danger and, perceived danger, the text from that person who you've got tension with. The heart responds the same way. I heard someone say that the heart rhythm pattern that will go to your brain is the same whether you're under stress from that text message or email that you get from the client and being in a car accident. The heart is going to send the same signal to the brain. So if the brain doesn't know the difference, whether I'm in physical danger or whether I'm just getting an email, and the fight or flight system is starting to activate, well, of course, we're going to go into survival mode. We're going to go into protection mode. That's not always good for us, but it's just, kind of how we're designed. So to be able to breathe with intention and with awareness through the heart, it starts to activate this amazing system that we have. And there's only a few ways that we can create coherence in the body, physiological coherence, to where it becomes measurable. And the first thing is, you've got to shift the rhythms of the heart. We've got to get a better signal going through the nervous system to the brain. And then the other is to be able to activate a renewing state. And we've had folks that have said, well, isn't that just toxic positivity? Like if I'm really stressed, if things aren't going well in my life, you want me to all of a sudden go to joy or passion? We have to, almost give a disclaimer like, and I probably said this to your team, like, this is not about going from full on anger and frustration to that joyous moment on the beach 20 years ago. It takes time for us to condition the nervous system to work through. It's like fingerprints on your nervous system or scar tissue. We have to navigate the wiring, the experiences, the beliefs that have been there for years and start to condition the body that there's a new way to approach this, but we have to create safety first internally, internal safety.
Can you talk a little bit about how you came from, if I remember correctly, is that like in the world that you were a sport agent?
Well, the truth is, I wanted to be a coach when I was younger. I just didn't think I would end up being, talk about how the universe works. I didn't think I would be the sort of coach that I am today, but I wanted to be a basketball coach. I was a hoop junkie. I played basketball in high school and was starting to go down that path. And one thing led to another, and I ended up in the sports industry working for, first a sports agent out of college and representing players and, kind of living this sort of, glamorous existence. It wasn't very glamorous, by the way, young people thinking about getting into the industry. And so you're right. Jeff and I both come from that industry. We met working for his dad. Um, and I was in a variety of different sales roles. I was in the luxury travel space. I dipped my toe in the financial technology world. And then one day, I'd been going back and forth to Denver for a company that I was spending time with that a former client was an investor in. And it really wasn't my cup of tea. And Jeff happened to be, in Denver at the time. And he was telling me, I'm going to create a business, my own business, and I'm going to hang a shingle. And I really don't want to do it alone. I'd love, for you to consider doing it. And this was so far afield for me because I'm a fairly risk averse person. So the idea of becoming an entrepreneur, even though I've worked for entrepreneurs pretty much my whole career, the idea of becoming an entrepreneur was a stretch. But, credit to Jeff for being the persistent, you know, lovable person that he is. Um, and there were very few people that I would have considered doing this sort of work with. And actually, our first business that we built together was rooted in partnerships and business growth and consulting and naming rights and doing the things that we were familiar with in our earlier in our career. But I think because we both shared a passion for human behavior, human performance, and we had been around elite performers over the course of our life, when we would evaluate our business and we would have those reflective conversations, and I give Jeff the credit for inspiring these discussions and creating the visioning exercises because he was a little bit further ahead in the journey of life than me because of some of the experiences that he had had. And you've had him on the pod, and I'm sure he's talked about losing his mom 20 plus years ago. And because I'd known him for so long, I had a pretty good seat to kind of observe his transformation. And so we would have these conversations about our prior business, and it's like, what are we really doing? Where do we get the most joy from? What are the things that we're most passionate about? And while we created some amazing partnerships, some groundbreaking partnerships that we could really hang our hat on and hang on the wall and put in our brochure and things of that nature. The thing that we kept coming back to was the people that we were being asked to come in and support and their organizations were super successful. So they had the resumes, they had all the trappings of success, and yet something was really off base for them. Something was misaligned. They didn't always recognize it, but they were really struggling. And you could see this reflected in how they managed, how they led their teams, how their organization operated. And one day Jeff calls me and he says, I really believe that we have the opportunity to create a business that supports leaders in being more conscious and more aware. Can you get what's in your brain onto paper so that I can visualize it, so that I can metabolize it and process how we actually operationalize it and turn it into a business? And Jeff's the mad scientist in this partnership, and he's the visionary. And he came back a few months later, and Now, what was on paper isn't what it necessarily became years later, but the idea was there that we could create an opportunity to really change the way people showed up in the world. And I think at our core, it was really about serving. It was a great big old challenge for you to tackle, and I'm super grateful for it because it's really changed my life, Ben. And I know you come from the mindset of servant leadership, and I now really fully understand what it's like to embody it.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you sharing like your story because I think sometimes people see like what you and Jeff have built and they just go, well, they must have always just been like this. And I think it's important that often the things that we build are because we built for ourselves first. And that's what I love about your story is that it so shows the fact is like, hey, don't just do as I'm saying, do as I have actually done and continue to do. I mean, the thing that I've heard you say throughout our conversation today is like, you're not done. You haven't arrived. What is the most common automatic thing that you see happening that people don't even realize is running on them? Whether it's an executive, high performer, professional athlete.
Urgency comes to mind first and foremost. I think for any high performer, now there are exceptions, right? There's the ER doctor and nurse who are dealing in triage, life and death, right? There's the military high performer, elite performer, the Delta Force, right? The freedom fighter. They're dealing in really urgent law enforcement. If you put that aside and just talk about people that are in sort of the business world, the corporate environment, who I imagine are the majority of your listeners, the sense of urgency is a killer for people right now because urgency not only does it ramp up the cortisol and the adrenaline, but it also brings forward some of the things that you touched on earlier, which is self-worth, belief in self. It uncovers those feelings of being an imposter, right? Like if I don't answer this email right now, they're going to think I'm less than, as opposed to, can I give space to this, right? And it uncovers vulnerability, which, you know, us successful folks, we don't want to show that we have any weaknesses. So I would say urgency is the one that really comes to mind. So for us, as we were going through this unknown with everyone else, that is when our son started to exhibit some of his mental health challenges. So on top of all the building a new business, navigating the great unknown, wanting to show up for clients, and trying to find answers to questions that we didn't have, to be confronted with this reality that I was entering into the great unknown as a parent. I look back on it, Ben, and I couldn't verbalize it at the time, but I felt it. And this was the work of coherence for me. I felt the silver lining. I felt like amidst the chaos that something really beautiful was going to come from it. And I wouldn't wish it on anyone, by the way. I get it. I understand that just like you had to, went through your experience with your son, I feel like Leah and I had to go through this experience with our son, and it's way bigger than me. It's way bigger than us. And it's really been a gift to be able to experience what we've gone through and to be able to share it with people. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients or people come up to us after a workshop or a session and share the same thing, that I have a sister, I have a parent, I have a child that's going through this. And, there's strength in community.
I think the thing when you think about if someone who's listening to us goes, I feel stuck, where is it that they start? Because you've talked about like the nervous system, right? Like, is it the mind, the body, the story, or, like where do they start? And I mean, do you fix the nervous system before you fix any of these other things?
I would first check in with where they feel stuck in their body. Because if you can identify the physiological aspect of it, we can start to work with, right? Because we want to try to intellectualize our way through challenges. And we've got this amazing cranial brain between the ears that can do so many things, right? There's what trillions of neurons in the brain. Like it's amazing. This system that we've been gifted, by God, by the universe, whatever you want to call it. But if we can identify where in the body we're feeling stuck, maybe we can then identify it through some somatic work. And this is, and Jeff is way more experienced at this than I am, but I've been fortunate to be on the receiving end of somatic work and to be able to identify where in the body am I feeling the resistance, where am I feeling the the tension. You said earlier, right? Like when you have that exchange with your wife, the marital conversation, right? That you feel it in your heart. Okay, great. Well, let's lean into that because I think the body, the book, The Body Keeps the Score, right? The body is storing all these experiences over time. The brain remembers them, but guess what? The body remembers them too. The gut remembers them. There's a direct connection between the cranial brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain. Breathe into your heart. Examine why it is that this person's frustrating you. It's just a mirror, it's just a reflection back to you. The person may be causing the feeling of stress or discomfort, but the reality is the stress is living in your system. So this is where the self mastery work comes into play. We have to get closer to ourselves. We have to learn how to love ourselves, to forgive ourselves, to give grace to ourselves. That has been one of my greatest lessons in this journey is to appreciate myself. My yoga teacher has this great ending to the process at the end. She says, you sit down, you put your arms out in a T, and then you wrap a hug around yourself. And she says, because hugs are free and we can always give ourselves a hug. We don't have to wait for someone else to hug us. And I think that's a great kind of metaphor for life. Like we can cultivate a deeper connection to ourselves and create more alignment internally in the body, in our spirit. And then I think we can start to examine and get closer to our values, to our purpose, to our mission, what's most important. Yeah, I think just being kinder to ourselves.
How do you bring this into an organization in a way that allows it to be able to go something deeply personal, but that scales the company?
Part two is team evolution. So as the individuals start to become more coherent, show up more open, show up with more ease, more grace, more vulnerability, then the unit can start to operate more coherently together. Coherence is transferable. I mean, that is the beauty of the science that we have to support this is that when I'm more coherent, my heart is projecting through its magnetic field. This is totally measurable by science. We have a heart that is a magnetic field that projects outside of our body. It's about 100 times greater than the brain. And so that's carrying emotional information. So as I'm more coherent, as I'm calmer, that is being transferred out into my environment. So I have way more influence over the people that I'm interacting with than they even know. The team will start to shift just by that one third group that is making the shifts. This is what we've noticed, right? So the case studies that we've created at Cornell and with Chicago Youth Centers or conferences for women or these other organizations, it isn't because 100% of the people said, I'm in, I'm doing this every day. All it did was take a small percentage of people to start to create more individual coherence. And they were just showing up differently in their interactions. And then it starts to mushroom. So now the team can start to operate more efficiently because the leader's modeling vulnerability. We're expressing more care and support for one another. The energy is shifting. So rather than coming in with tension and resistance, now I'm stepping in with care and empathy. Now, at first, the person who comes in with the tension, who's used to the fight, might be taken aback. And I've had clients share this where it's like, I'll say, how'd the person react? They're like, actually, it kind of stopped them in their tracks because they were waiting for the fight. But over time, as we start to model this, coherence is compounding. It's compounding for us individually, right? We start to rewire the brain, the body, the nervous system. We can then start to rewire how the team operates. And when the team starts to consistently show support for one another, like your team has been modeling, now trust starts to improve because I feel safer. If I feel safer, I'm willing to open up more. So it's not a word that we put on a value sheet or on a website. We're literally embodying it. So I feel more trust.
Well, one of the things that I like that you just said there is the framework is not about eliminating stress or the eliminating bad actors because I think it's about it seems to me it's about recognizing it, right? I mean, it's not to be able to say like, "Hey, you're gonna go into a work setting and it's gonna be like, you know what, kumbaya." It doesn't mean that like hard shit is not gonna come down the way or there's gonna be. Can you talk just a little bit about that? Because I think sometimes people are like, for this to really work or just anything, like I need to eliminate all these things. Like I need to, extricate myself, which I think is a great utopia, but not a realistic expectation.
Yeah, I have to bunker myself off from everything else and create this sort of Pollyanna-ish existence. No, you hit it on the head. And this is why we say stress, there's good news about stress. It lives in the body because there's always going to be things in your external world that are going to create a stimulus. The news, your boss, traffic, your teenage child that, is acting out, whatever it might be, your health, your physical health. There are going to be these things that trip us up along the way. But knowing that we can internally create more alignment, more groundedness, more steadiness, more coherence, this is what allows us to navigate all the chaos that's still happening. The chaos isn't going away. You become the storm, right? It's like the famous saying, fate whispers to the warrior, you can't handle the storm. And the warrior whispers back, I am the storm. Imagine that you talk about being the creator. Like, yeah, there are all these people that are in my world that are misbehaving, but I don't subscribe to it and I'm not going to feed into it. And part of it is creating that alignment internally that allows you to go through your day living your values, right? Living your truth, living coherently. And that's what opens up, you know, I think opportunity for all of us is that if we can get to that place, we can start to navigate the complexity and the challenges in a more easeful way, with more space, with more energy, right? So we get, you hear this all the time because you do this work. I don't have time for this. Jeff's favorite saying when we hear that in a workshop is, well, then you have to do the exercises twice as much as everyone else. But it is true. Like I have this full plate. How am I going to fit one more thing onto there? You're asking me, I got to do these coherence exercises. And what we're helping people understand is if I take a few minutes every day, even while I'm experiencing the stressor, while I'm driving, while I'm brushing my teeth, while I'm visioning out my day, you don't have to make extra time for it. You can habit stack it while you're making your coffee. Create a little coherence in your body. It'll help you create more space and ease and efficiency for the things that are already on your plate.
I think that's been one of the great gifts of working with you and Jeff is that realizing it's not another thing I need to put on my list to do. It's not okay, I got to add this into my calendar because I'm finding is that my calendar is actually providing me immense amounts of opportunity for me to do what you just talked about, stacking it. The thing that I thought was another great gift that you gave, you said you don't need to close your eyes. This is something that you can do anywhere, anytime. And the reality of it is when I say in 60 seconds or less, they're not joking. They're not joking. And I find myself now going into things where I go, this might be a little bit this might be as I say in the piloting world, that was sporty.
Well, I'm really glad you bring it up because these are techniques, right? So we've used the term meditation a little bit here today, and there's a meditative quality that comes from them. But these techniques were developed to be used by elite performers that were in life and death stressful situations. It's the EMT that's driving to the accident and has to process millions of pieces of information at once. It's the Delta Force, leader that has to step into, a dangerous situation, or the SWAT leader, or the ER doctor or nurse that steps into a triage situation. So they certainly can't step away, close their eyes, and go into a meditation, but they can do the techniques while they're experiencing the moment. And that's why we say, like, yes, it sounds overly simplistic. That's intentional. But this is very accessible because the science is telling me that, oh, other high performers are doing this and they're doing it while they're experiencing life and they don't have to do it for very long. So I'm glad you brought that up. These are techniques that are meant to be done in the moment, which is why I think our clients have really leaned into them in a beautiful way, and they're seeing the sort of shifts that you described.
Yeah, I think I like to think of it as like these micro doses. So the beauty of it is like you're working with like these pretty incredible companies, organizations. But I think the thing that you and Jeff are doing that I think is incredibly unique is giving access to people in free ways. Can you talk a little bit about, right? You're talking about these techniques, I'm talking about like microdosing and how these elite performers are doing this while they're in these moments to like keep them locked in. You guys do something unique for like the communities of doing one like these sessions on a monthly basis. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that people are going, this sounds amazing. I'd love to be able to do this. And maybe I'd even love to have like my business partner, my life partner, where we can actually maybe change the game rather than force the game, allow the game to come to us. Can you talk a little bit about what you and Jeff are doing? Because I think what you're doing is incredibly unique and what I haven't seen any true like game changer. They hide often behind a paywall.
Thank you. I appreciate you naming that and recognizing it. Way back at the beginning of COVID, Jeff recognized that our community was going to need a landing spot to just process, to come together. We were all in our bunkers, right? And we were disconnected from each other. And so we were already on Zoom because, I'm in the DC area, he's in California. And so our team is in other places around the world. So we needed that connectivity anyway. So it was like, great, let's set up a 30-minute call every day. Sometimes it went an hour, and we allowed people to just drop in. And again, this is where Jeff, being the visionary, is a gift as a business partner for me, because he recognized how important community was going to be in this. And as we were kind of visioning out Paragon, one of the things that was a reframe for us, and this is where Coherence has really helped both of us, was the concept of abundance. Whereas we came from a background where we were deal making, like we were driven by the percentage that we were going to get by creating a naming rights deal. And we were looking at the numbers and looking at how do we create financial abundance. I think for us, the shift of going from abundance representing one thing to abundance representing something completely different, or more, I should say. Abundance of gratitude, abundance of friendship, abundance of coherence, right? And for us, it was, how do we create abundance by touching as many people as we can? So, yes, it's nice when organizations bring us in and compensate us to facilitate workshops and programs and engagements and ongoing touch points. But to be able to then open that up to a broader audience, to give clients and their communities a place to land a couple times a week where they can integrate the work, because the real strength in coherence is the application of it. It's like anything else, right? When you go to the gym 3, 4 times a week and you're building the endurance and you're building the muscle, invariably it's going to lead to better results than if you only go once a week or once a month. So by allowing people the chance to land, one, it gives them an opportunity to practice. So we facilitate a technique so they get to get into coherence. Two, they get to connect with other people in our community who are doing the same thing. And then we offer space for discussion. It's brief, but it's enough for people to recognize, wow, I'm not the only one going through this challenge. And that, I think, has been one of the great gifts of this journey for us, is the building of the community. And then we've expanded it to offering workshops every month, free workshops where people can come in. And I think this month's theme is on coherent communication or crucial conversations. Our head of program operations, Kristen Granillos, has started a program for women, mainly for women 40 plus, but for women in general, right, who are navigating the challenges of the day. We've done programs for teens, for young adults, which is really for me, a personal passion point, is being able to educate parents, number one, help them get more coherent, right? Because we know the journey of parenthood can be incredibly stressful, and we do and say things that we often regret. And then two, being able to provide these tools to kids who are navigating a world that you and I just, we didn't know growing up, right? The idea that it's in my face every day. Everyone's best version of themselves is in front of me, and how do I process that? So we have made a concerted effort to bring our community together in many ways. And honestly, it's been, you talk about the 10x process, which you're obviously, coaching people in every single day. That's been a huge eye opener for us. So, while we still do some traditional outreach for business development, we found that when we double down on our community and we give them more touch points and opportunities to connect, it's, self-fulfilling, because we then have more opportunities to go in and support people.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's an incredible gift, and for those of you listening, we'll put some links in, I think, in the show notes. But Brett, I want to thank you for coming on and just sharing so generously. And if you didn't get the feeling by now, like, this is so simple that if you want to change your organization, you want to change the direction of your family, you want to change the direction of who you are and who you're being and becoming, I got to tell you, this heart coherence framework that Jeff and Brett are putting out into the world is truly game changing. And so, Brett, if people want to know more about you, they want to follow you, they want to hear more kind of your thoughts, like, where can they go and get more of you, get more of Paragon?
Yeah, we as a company, we're active on LinkedIn, and Instagram. You can hit me on LinkedIn if you want to connect with me, if you're curious about the work. If you're interested in attending, and I'd offer to any of your listeners, or followers of this show, to please reach out if you would like to be part of our community and drop in and be on, the distribution list where you can find out about when these workshops are being held. We would love to host you. And the calls, by the way, the weekly calls, it's a drop in when you're available. These are not, you have to attend every day, every week in order to be a regular participant. We have people that we haven't seen in months, and they say, I saw this on my calendar, and I needed a moment of coherence. And there's no judgment. We're grateful to welcome them in and welcome them back. And so I would extend that invitation to your listeners, to anyone that's in your circle. Please reach out to me. LinkedIn's probably the best place, Brett Weinroth. And if you want to follow Paragon on Instagram or LinkedIn, we've usually got some great content going out.
Brett, hour and 50 gone by in a blink.
It's gone by in a blink. You predicted this.
I did. I said, I think that we're going to feel like this has happened over 20 minutes. But as you know, I'd like to leave and let our guests with the last ripple question, thought, prompt. What would you leave our audience with?
Thank you for that invitation. I would ask, where in your life could you implement more coherence, or where in your life, if you implemented more, had more coherence, could you maybe have better outcomes? I would pose that question. If you had more alignment, if you felt more at ease, where in your life might that create, yeah, better outcomes for you, more optimal outcomes? I think that's a good place to start.
I love it. Brett, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate you. Appreciate all that you do with this show and spreading the good word. And thanks for having me on.